Good afternoon, everyone. Meteorologist Charles Roop here in the Pinpoint Weather Center to give you the latest update on Hurricane Dorian. Now, there is some better news, not completely good news, but some better news that we have in terms of the stats, but it's still a dangerous hurricane. Let's talk about the latest advisory from the National Hurricane Center. This is the max sustained winds are at 150. They have dropped now. We're still dealing with a dangerous category 4 hurricane on the Saffir-Simpson scale, moving now west-northwestward at 1 mile per hour. That is a little bit significant because now we have it, instead of going more due west, more just now north of west, even more so because the last bearing had it at 280 degrees. Now it's at 285 degrees. So in other words, taking more of a slightly northern jog. We want to see that. That's some good news there. So let's take a look at the advisory a little more in depth. Now the pressure has increased. That's a good thing too. That shows a sign of some weakening, but it's still a very powerful hurricane. Regardless, no changes to the advisories that we have in effect right now. There's still hurricane warnings in effect for parts of, let's see, Grand Bahama, of course, excluding and the Abacos Islands too. Jupiter Inlets to the Flagler-Volusia County line for hurricane warnings. So there's a lot to ingest in. So the east coast of Florida, if you are in the warning, if you're watching us from there, then all your preps should be completed, and brace yourselves for the approach of this storm. So let's go to the map here and show you what we have over the near term. It's not until we get to, let's say, tomorrow morning that we can see more of a northern jog with this thing, except it's picking up speed just a little bit more. By Tuesday morning, expected to be still a Category 4 hurricane with winds around 145 miles an hour, give or take. But as we go in time, by the time we get to, say, around Wednesday morning, we'll see this storm moving offshore still as maybe even a Category 3 hurricane. It's expected to weaken as it moves off towards the north. I'll talk a little bit more why in just a moment. And then parallel the coastline, possibly even making a landfall on the outer banks of North Carolina, depending on how far it is within the cone to the left or to the right, and then begin to exit out to sea. So this is the official forecast track. There's still a chance it can make landfall along Florida's coastline and go parallel along with it. So that's why these hurricane warnings are in effect for these locations. So there's a potential for seeing not just hurricane force winds, but at the very least tropical storm force winds, along with coastal surge and also very heavy rainfall. This is the water vapor loop. There's some little things happening here that I'm picking up on. One being there's a trough, a low pressure digging down to the eastern part of the country. Let me move this map a little bit so you kind of get a better perspective. There it is right there, and that's sinking down towards the east. The ridge I've been talking about for the last few days, based on observations between last night to this morning, it's starting to weaken a little bit, starting to shrink and move off towards the east, likely because of that trough I mentioned. It's going to pretty much ram that ridge. So again, expected to break that down. Also, another little thing I wanted to mention. Oops, too close. There's Dorian right there. You can see, maybe not so much on this imagery, but watching this throughout the morning. Any thunderstorm development that you see on the satellite imagery, see the tops being blown off. I'm not giving away money, it's just tops being blown off a storm. And what that indicates is some wind shear. We want that if you want a weaker system. So that is expected to run into that as we go through time. We start to see more colder cloud tops once again, indicating the possibility of it still trying to get its act back together, maybe going through another eye wall replacement cycle. But regardless, it's still a powerful hurricane. And even looking at it, use the long lines on the screen here as kind of a reference. Let me cut these warnings off right here. Maybe more of a hint of a jog northward. Whether that's just a wobble in the eye or what, still, the eye is now moving north or farther north of High Rock and Grand Bahama and continues to kind of move more in that general direction. Still Freeport, High Rock, Sweetening Cay, even yesterday, it made landfall. Just to put some perspective of what's been going on here. Landfall was right about here yesterday, probably around yesterday morning or so, late yesterday morning, early afternoon, and this is where it's at now. So in between there, where it made landfall, where it's at now, it's only a difference of about maybe 80 miles. It's moved about 80 miles in just around 24 hours. So this has been moving really slow, and unfortunately for the people in the Bahamas, this has been a nightmare. Okay, I keep seeing video on social media of storm surge coming in. So this is a very dangerous situation that they're dealing with right now, and unfortunately, they're going to deal with this for a little bit longer as this storm slowly exits the Bahamas. Now what we have is the wind shear. This is what I was talking about a little bit earlier. You could see those blues to the yellows. Those are the higher shear. That's a higher shear on the map. And as we go through time, we'll see that shear begin to interact with the storm and slowly begin to weaken it. It's not going to be an overnight thing, but it'll still be at least a Cat 2, Cat 3, Cat 3, then Cat 2 as it heads off towards the north, but still packing a punch along the coastal area. So just because it's weakening doesn't necessarily mean that it's not going to be a dangerous situation. So keep that in the back of your mind, especially if you're along the east coast of the southeastern United States. Probability of 40+ mile/hour winds, tropical storm force or greater. Again, if you've seen this graph before, what you see on the table rather is cumulative probability, so added up over time. And then the numbers on the screen, those are the instantaneous. So by the time we get to tomorrow afternoon, we have a 90% chance of seeing tropical storm force winds in Fort Pierce. That's almost a given. Miami, about 47%, but as this takes off towards the north, if we get to Wednesday morning, say 9, 10 o'clock, Jacksonville, almost a 50-50 chance of seeing tropical storm force winds. Daytona Beach, it's definitely a certainty over there. But as we go through time, we'll see the odds decrease as Dorian takes off to the north and east. So I tweaked this graphic. Those of you who follow me on Twitter, if you want, go ahead, at Charles Root WCTV. I posted this graphic up there. I zoomed in a little bit to the Big Bend in South Georgia to kind of give you guys a better idea of probability, what we could expect in the near term. So I put Bainbridge, Thomasville, Valdosta. Some cities I couldn't get data for, but this is what we have. So tomorrow noon, not much of a chance, maybe Lake City, 2% chance of seeing tropical storm force winds. But as we go through, like say to Wednesday morning around 9 o'clock, of course, the farther east you go, those odds will increase. So Jacksonville, about 48% chance, again, 50-50 chance pretty much. Once you get to Lake City, around 21%, Tallahassee, 5%. Cumulative at that point for Tallahassee, let me see if I can find that place, around 6%. Jacksonville, cumulative about almost 50%. So let's go through Wednesday evening. Those odds increase a little bit. And just a reminder, any deviation to the left or right of this track can change this. But about a quarter chance over in Lake City, Wednesday afternoon to the evening, and then maybe 11% chance from Valdosta to Perry. And as we go forward in time, by the time we get to the overnight hours, let's say around 1 a.m. Thursday, we'll see those odds begin to drop as Dorian takes off towards the north and east. So this gives you a better idea of the odds of seeing these kinds of winds, 40 miles an hour or greater in our area. So let's start off with Monday today into the overnight period. Maybe some higher winds offshore waters if you can be out boating late at night. But tomorrow afternoon to the evening, we'll see those winds roughly around 10, maybe about 5, maybe 15 miles an hour in some locations across our area. Meanwhile, Daytona Beach, you'll start to see those winds begin to pick up. This is a European scenario, by the way, European model scenario. Then we get to Wednesday afternoon, and we could see these winds. We could see 10 to 15 mile/hour winds, maybe a few gusts here and there as we go through the day on Wednesday. So Wednesday is really the day we could probably see some of the effects, if anything, from Dorian, but nothing expected to be catastrophic, of course. Again, the risk for tropical storm force winds remains pretty low throughout our area. As we play forward in time, as we get to, say, early Thursday morning, the center of Dorian is expected to still be offshore or close to shore, right around the latitude of Jacksonville. But overnight, the winds, maybe about 10, maybe 15 miles an hour at most, a few gusts here and there, but otherwise not expecting any issues. And then as we get through the day on Thursday into Thursday night to Friday morning, that storm takes off, and we'll start to see a little bit more relaxing. Although the winds in the offshore waters, if you're going out to the Gulf, keep an eye on that. It could be a little choppy out there because of that northwesterly flow by the time we get to that point. For Dorian, and is expected to hang around for a little longer. We'll have to see how this verifies over time. But as we get to tomorrow morning, I suspect take off towards more of a northerly fashion. Now, you may see some of these bands on the northwestern side. There's a potential we could see a few showers out of this. Not expecting anything crazy, though, out of it over time. But it takes off towards the north, and again, depending how close this gets to us, we could see the potential, maybe some of that cloud cover moving in, and of course a little bit of gusty winds in terms of maybe 10 to 15 mile per hour sustained, a few gusts higher than that. But as it stands right now, majority of the effects are going to be out to our east, and then we start to see this take off, continue to take off more towards the north. Again, any deviation of the track will change the impacts that we can expect in our area. Not much of a change over the last day or so. It seems to be about the same. By the time we get to Friday, we'll see maybe 1 to 2, maybe even 1 to 3 inches in some spots along the coastline. Some higher amounts. Vero Beach, I've been seeing the same number too with this model, about 5 inches or so. And again, depends how close the center of circulation gets to the coastline.